This week on To the Contrary.
First, sorority sisters told to stay away from frat parties. Behind the headlines, male allies in feminism. And the NFL is trying to win over women and mothers.
Bonnie Bay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, sexual assault on campus.
Irrational and sexist. That's what sorority sisters at the University of Virginia are calling a mandate to avoid frat parties this weekend. The National Pan-Hellenic Conference issued the order saying, quote, "The activities on men's bid night present significant safety concerns," end quote. Women could face penalties if they don't comply.
It's not about not going to a party. It's about the fact that this decision objectifies women, and it bans them from making autonomous decisions and having the agency to make a decision for themselves.
The school recently lifted a temporary suspension of fraternities that followed an article in Rolling Stone magazine about a gang rape at UVA. While details in the article have been discredited, the larger issue of sexual assault at UVA and other campuses is a wellspring of controversy nationwide. Some sexual assault survivors are lobbying against proposed laws intended to fight rape because they say the laws may make things worse. The New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, and Virginia state legislatures are attempting to refer cases of campus rape to the local police, that instead of to the schools where the assaults occur. The New York bill would require colleges to inform survivors of assault they can report their cases to police. The other 3 state laws require that most or all cases be reported to the police. Some advocates say police aren't any better at handling rape cases than universities or colleges, and they say laws mandating police prosecutions or investigations deny survivors the choice of how far they want to push their allegation.
So, Rina Shah-Bahara, let's start with UVA. Is banning these sisters from going to the frat parties the right approach to end sexual assault on campus?
Without a doubt, it is the most misguided strategy. And I'm a former president of a National Pan-Hellenic Council at a major state school. I'll tell you, there were edicts passed down when I was there a decade ago, and they were just as misguided. They objectified women, and I think this is going to lead to outcry and then rebellion.
Well, I agree with her. I think it sends the wrong message in 2 ways, a couple of ways. First, it sends the message that women need to be protected. Second, that the men do not have any responsibility. Like someone said, it's like so 1950s.
Amber?
No, this is absolutely ridiculous that they're attempting to ban sorority members from going to frat parties. You can't create rules that will prevent terrible things from happening and sort of punish the entire big picture here for something that has extremely tarnished the university.
This is so sexist. I mean, what era are we living in? All I want to say is this is a classic example of rape culture. I mean, normalize men's sexual violence and blame women and put the responsibility on them.
So what are you asking for then? Banning all frat parties?
No, I actually think, you know, as my alma mater, and I love UVA so much, from banning fraternities to banning alcohol to banning sororities, they have been completely misguided in their entire approach. It's not about alcohol. It's not about banning anything. It really is getting to the core of this issue of why men feel like they can rape women and get away with it, because sober people rape.
Oh,
and
so
men
what are you going to say? Subject every fraternity brother to psychoanalysis paid
no,
for?
because it's not just frat.
I mean, how do you
it's not just frat
what
brothers.
I'm saying, I can see from the university's perspective, if you ban the loci where these things are largely taking place, not all of them, but a lot of them are, you would try to get at stopping the behavior from happening.
You think so? You know, Dartmouth just announced yesterday that they're banning alcohol, and you know Notre Dame did the same thing to kind of curb their sexual assaults. And you know what happened? Binge drinking, and these parties just moved off campus. So what I'm saying is, alcohol doesn't rape. You know, sober people rape. Rapists rape. That is what we need to discuss.
The fact here is that this ban did not come from UVA. It actually came from the National Pan-Hellenic Conference itself, and that is a that's all the sororities, basically, the most elite ones. And I can tell you as a president, when it's coming from the conference itself, that's really troubling. But the sort of saving grace here is that these are leaders, these are older women typically, they're in the leadership of these sororities even though they've moved on from college, and they are guiding the way on this. And it's going to take younger women that are in the chapters right now saying, no, 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 you've got to do this another way. Again, 10 years ago when I was in this leadership spot, exactly, I said to them, the leaders of the chapters, I said, there's no way we can work by banning things. We've got to change from the inside. We've got to educate our women on what to do with these parties because they're not going to stop going to these parties. We've got to find ways to make ourselves safer as women.
I think that awareness is key here. If you know, obviously in college, women go to frat parties. They do if they're in a sorority, they do if they live in the dorms, they off campus. People go to parties in college and alcohol is served. What they need to do is maybe UVA, if they're so concerned about, you know, the focus being on rape on campus, is awareness, you know, and sororities as well. Say, hey, this is what goes on at these parties, this is what you need to be aware of, and this is how you can prevent things from happening. Keep your drinks close to you, don't be leaving it where people are gonna put drugs in it.
Okay, I wanna switch to these state laws that are referring the cases to the police. Women's sororities and activists on campus are against this. I mean, if it's a murder, it gets referred to the police. If it's any kind of serious violent crime, but rape, it gets immediately referred to the police. And what seems backward from where I sit is, why is rape handled differently?
Well,
and why would they not want it?
It's a complex story, no? The reason why there's a lot of opposition to the mandatory reporting, which is what the Virginia law is proposing, is that victims that have been surveyed overwhelmingly have terrible experiences going to the police. The police has been totally unresponsive. So it's not like you're protecting them to something that it's going to help them. The report is that it's terrible. So states like New York, through the leadership of Governor Cuomo, are designing strategies that are more what they call victim-driven, in which the victim has a choice. They can go to the university and then they can decide if they want to go to the police, but they're not mandated to go to the police. At the same time, they're not banned from going to the police,
okay,
because
but
that's what it was confusing.
I understand what you're saying, because let's look, for example, at the Cosby case. One of the women went to the Philadelphia prosecutor and was kind of laughed out, or in a sense, the prosecutor said, I don't see enough evidence to get this past a jury.
In these towns.
So, but that was in the 80s. And
it's still happening. It's still happening.
Okay,
no,
but
the
then
stories are overwhelming.
Wait a second, but isn't that then a matter of police education as opposed to not referring it to the police?
You're right. I mean, it's both. It's both. It's about the police need to be more sensitive. They need to be trained. They should have the capacity. I agree with you. But I also agree with the victim-driven approach, because rape is different from murder. It's equally terrible, but the circumstances of rape are not the circumstances of murder. And the victim is central to the story. And I prefer that the victim has that decision how to proceed with the case.
But you don't get to pick and choose when the law applies. Rape is a crime. It is a felony.
It's a serious, violent. It ruins a lot of
and you don't get to pick
survivors'
and choose
lives.
When it's illegal and when it's not. Based
and where are they
upon
supposed to go?
What the, yeah, exactly.
When I was in this position, I'll tell you, women who were raped at fraternity parties, and I had them come to me. I had 3 that I can name in 1 year's term as president. And I can tell you, they did not want to go to the police because they did not want to be shamed on campus. 10 years later, this is still the same story. Hindsight is 20/20. I would say to those women now, please let the police get involved. They're getting better. It's not 1992. It's not 2001. It's 2015.
I mean, there are people who say in this era, if you don't go to the police, if society doesn't start putting the shame on the rapist as opposed to the survivor, we're never going to get anywhere.
It hasn't changed yet. It has not changed yet.
Yeah,
and these women have to coexist with their rapists.
It won't change without women pushing that, right?
These girls are in, let's not forget, it's a bubble. The college campus is a bubble. These women are free, yet they're not. They're over 18. They're in charge of their own bodies, but they don't want to coexist and sit in the same class with their rapists. They worry and worry and worry because nobody's out there advocating for them.
And look how much damage that Rolling Stone story did about UVA.
Exactly.
So, yes, a possibly false claim, got huge national media attention, and now when women who are actually raped, are they going to feel like people, especially on UVA, believe them? Because of this story, they're probably going to be kind of worried about it.
All right, let us know what you think about this. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnier Bay. And
shouldn't what makes each of us unique make our treatment unique? Advanced genomic testing is changing the way we fight cancer. That's precision cancer treatment. You can learn more at cancercenter.com. Cancer Treatment Centers of America. Care that never quits.
How much money do you have in your pocket right now?
I have $40.
21?
Could something that small make an impact on something as big as your retirement?
I don't think so.
Well, if you start putting that money towards your retirement every week and let it grow over time for 20, 30 years, that retirement challenge might not seem so big after all.
To the contrary, behind the headlines, male allies, men's involvement in ending gender violence and supporting feminism. We spoke with one sociologist who says it's vitally important for ending gender inequality, but she cautions beware of unintended consequences.
Women's leadership is primary and paramount, and the way I see it is that they're the primary thinkers and agents of feminism, and men's involvement is critical and necessary to support the groundwork that women have been doing for years. That doesn't mean that men can't be leaders. It means that men have to learn what that means.
The fight against domestic violence and other forms of violence against women was launched and is generally run by women's groups, but men's groups are playing an important role now, too.
The work that men's organizations are doing is primarily targeting men in talking about masculinity in ways that women's organizations are not necessarily doing. That's the first step, is getting men involved, educating men, energizing men, mobilizing men. That's step one. Step two is paying attention to how they're engaged. The nature of their involvement is also critical, because we're talking about a movement that is committed to ending gender inequality and violence against women outside of the movement. So it's really important how women and men relate to each other inside of the movement as well.
May Kummer says there have always been men in the women's movement, but the increase in male leadership has caused tensions.
The fact that patterns of gender inequality are rearing its head inside of the movement is problematic for a movement that is committed to ending these. The men who come in with who are relatively new to the work can often ride a glass escalator in terms of being pushed to visible leadership roles and being seen as a legitimate, credible voice on something that they maybe don't know that much about yet.
Through interviews and first-hand accounts, May Kummer found a lack of understanding is causing problems.
If your analysis on gender inequality is not yet that advanced, you might not see how the sexual objectification and commodification of women's bodies is connected to men's violence against women. You might see those as two distinct issues, when in fact they are certainly intimately connected. There's a lot of lack of self-awareness and self-reflection, especially when men are new to the work. We all live in a sexist culture, and women can say things too that are sexist.
May Kummer says these were all unintended consequences that have to be addressed.
One of the ways that activists have sort of confronted the unintended consequences of men's increasing involvement, for example, the sexism and male privilege that men bring into these spaces, inadvertently oftentimes, is to emphasize men's accountability. Women's organizations and men's organizations can create similar spaces to talk about male privilege and power, and how the unequal social arrangements outside of these movements are also reflected inside of them.
But there is also the issue of funding.
There's competition over something that is perpetually underfunded, and that's always going to create problems. Men serve a very important role and function in this work, and that work should be supported. Women serve a very important role and function in these movements, and that work must be supported.
Ultimately, McComber says change cannot happen without everyone's involvement.
ending gender inequality is about changing culture. And we cannot change culture unless we have the participation of those who have secured access to the social, ideological, and institutional power.
So how do you navigate this very tricky track? You want men involved. Unless men become advocates for women's rights and change, in many cases, their own personal behavior, women are never going to be, on equal footing in terms of society. On the other hand, is it good for men's groups to be taking over in terms of publicity, media attention, and funding to the point where maybe women no longer even lead the movement?
Well, it's a complex situation. I think she articulated all those issues so well. I will encourage people to listen to her again. It was really wonderful. And I think everybody has a role. It's a problem that involves all of us. Women have the role, and how we characterize the issues and how we fight for our empowerment socially and economically. And we need men to collaborate, but it's our struggle. And the same thing is for men, because they are part of the solution. I was reading an article in which a man said, misogyny is also my problem. I'm as much a victim of it as women are. And I really, truly believe that too, that when we're more equal, when we're all able to fully actualize ourselves, and collaborate in childcare, in taking care of the home, we're all going to be happier. So we all have to collaborate. The funding issues, I hope the funders realize that they should not be giving the money only to men's group. That is also very important to give into women's group. And I do feel strongly that women's group should be headed by women. Men can collaborate, men can participate, but these are the issues of women, and they should be heading those organizations.
So last year we saw He for She, the campaign, and Emma Watson was front and center. I mean, how awesome was that to have such a major actress take that role and say, men should be advocating for women's rights. I rarely tip my hat to Hillary Clinton, but I'm going to say this. She said it best when she said, women's issues are everyone's issues. And the problem that happened after He for She is we got these more men on panels talking about women's issues, empowerment. But the one thing they're doing wrong is always saying, why don't you women speak up? Women, you raise your voices, speak up. They need to be doing something else. More men. When they're on these panels, overwhelmingly, we've seen since He for She debuted last year, men are saying, they're taking places on panels, but they're saying, please, women, raise your voices, be a part, be active. It's on them. They're forgetting that the onus is actually on them to be a part of our movement.
Do we worry that men, 5 or 10 years from now are going to be sort of controlling the women's movement in a way? In other words, look at the civil rights movement. There were always white people involved from the very beginning, and they should be there. They were never leading it.
Yeah.
And yet, with gender,
well, let's hope that doesn't happen, because we actually need men, right? They're some of our most important allies in this movement, but we definitely, we have to be, I'm weary of the men, the MRAs, the men's rights activists who are like, we should have more space on the subway to, spread our legs, and I'm scared of the funding being diverted to them. But at the end of the day, men also stand to gain a lot from feminism, and they are our most important allies. We can't let situations like this deter them from the movement.
I think that the term and the feminism movement has been warped a little bit. It's about equality, not higher preference to either sex. And I think that we're there. I think that, I worked in a very male-dominated environment. I was a helicopter pilot in the Army, served in combat. And, you do your job, you speak up, you make sure you're part of the conversation, and men respect you for it.
Yeah, but we're talking about something a little bit different here. There are women, you did your job and you were a leader in your position in the military, but there are also women running women's rights groups, getting publicity for women's, advancing society. And all of a sudden, there have always been men involved, like the video we showed of Jesse Jackson marching in the 80s with Patricia Ireland when she was head of NOW. But now they're seeking money, and they're going for the same pots of money that never even got big enough to really fund the women's movement.
Well, I think that everyone's voice matters in terms of pushing a cause. So whether it's men, whether it's women, it all is contributing to it. So I think
but
both
the funding
matter.
diversion, you're right, that is very, very worrisome. And oh, gosh, can you imagine if they came in and took all the money? Then we have to start a whole
No,
other
but
process.
it's happening
Bonnie.
already.
I don't know the story in detail, so I'm taking the information from you. But it means that men are in charge, isn't it? Because the minute they ask for the money, they get it. But you have to fight for it, and they get it immediately.
But they're used to asking for it and demanding for it more. This is the same way they get, hey, they're still paid more than we are.
I think the effects have yet to be seen. I say go ahead, let them take some of the money, see what happens. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Well, then
Can
we'll
we
make
get
a
a
fight
refund?
for it. We'll get a refund. We will. We'll fight
Get
for
a
it.
refund. From male allies to the Super Bowl.
The NFL is trying to win over women, even as negative publicity continues to build. The league is holding clinics nationwide to convince moms that tackle football is safe for children. But a new study shows NFL players who began playing before they turned 12 have significant brain problems compared to other players who started later. Half of Americans in a recent poll said they do not want their child to play football. The league also angered many women's groups with its poor handling of players guilty of domestic abuse. So the NFL is running its own anti-domestic violence ad during the Super Bowl. But at least one feminist group thinks it's not enough. Ultraviolet is running ads during the big game on major websites calling for better accountability from the league and the resignation of Commissioner Roger Goodell.
So Goodell, who admitting his mishandling and keeping going on, is nowhere near being asked to leave the head of the NFL.
No. I think the ad is really powerful. We all know that Super Bowl ads are really important. You know, they're very expensive. This is the first time a domestic violence ad is going to be run during the Super Bowl, so that's great. But the NFL is still distancing itself from a clearly violence against women culture that they have within their organization. And you know, their fastest growing demographic for football fans is women. It's about 46%.
Explain that to me, please.
Explain that to me, please. Not to perpetuate a stereotype, but when I read that statistic, I was like, wow, that's fascinating. But the point is, they need to address this problem, and they need to give women more than lip service.
All right, and how about these moms going to training camp? I mean, you have 2 teenage kids. Would you ever let them play football?
Yeah, absolutely not. But you know, I do tobacco control work, so I've been fighting the tobacco industry for a long time, and some of the writings about the NFL compare them to the tobacco industry. And I have to tell you, with their reaction to the study on the impact of head injury when they start getting them before the age of 12, and it's 20% increase in chronic condition. They're totally distancing themselves from it and encouraging moms to allow their kids younger, 10, 6 years old, they were talking about in some of these articles, to play and tackle. They really have a long way to go. And the challenge that we have with the NFL is a huge industry. How many? $65 billion? I mean, billions of dollars. The top rated program on television is the Super Bowl. So how do you reform a sector that has so much money and so much power and such a large following? It's a real challenge.
Amber, your thoughts?
Well, back to
Are you watching the Super Bowl?
Yes, I am. Go Seahawks. Yeah, so back to the PSA about domestic violence. I thought it was extremely powerful, real world scenario. It was based, I don't know if it was the actual audio of what happened, but yeah, it was based off of an actual call. And it was so powerful. And I think, speaking of having national conversations, I think on such a national platform, most of America is tuned into the Super Bowl. It is a great way to bring awareness to domestic
Will people
violence.
get the message, though? A lot of people watching the NFL, I mean, we have to think about our viewers as well. I mean, I got the message very clearly. Some people might think it's just a messy house and a woman ordering pizza. I felt like it needed to be a little bit more clear, not showing a battered, bruised woman, which is, objectifying as well, but I don't know. I thought maybe it was a little too artsy.
I think.
All right, but do me a favor, because since we both asked each other, explain to me, women watching the Super Bowl, why do women continue to do it in view of all the bad stuff this organization has done to women.
Well, my thing with that whole anti-domestic violence ad is that regardless of their intentions, I think that the NFL is trying to sort of fix their bad image when it comes to some of their players. I still think it's a great message that needs to be put out there, but
why the game?
In terms of watching the Super Bowl, I am so not a good person because I watch football on the Super Bowl. I do not watch it during the season. I am like a sole Super Bowl watcher.
It's a social activity. You stand around any water cooler in this country, and the question is, who are you rooting for? You know, some women do love football, and I'll give them that. It's a social experience, and it's something that's ingrained. It's ingrained in the American psyche. You know, it's our sport. I mean, I know baseball is a national pastime, but talking about sports at work, and specifically football, is huge. And so I think women want to fit in. I think a lot of women want to fit in. I've caught a bunch of fakers.
I know women who grew up hating football, not watching it. Then they get a boyfriend who watches it, and all of a sudden they're the biggest fans in the world.
Well, some of them,
that bothers me.
It's an experience for the two of them to bond on. I mean, I'll admit, ever since I got married, it's something I've bonded with my husband, but specifically since last year. And I'll tell you, I am not afraid of not watching football anymore. I don't like it, especially after the Ray Rices of the world. I'm over it.
All right, that's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.